Maybe you've heard about BTPs, coupon bonds, but maybe you don't really understand what they're about. Well, in this video, we're talking about bonds for those who want to start investing because they're starting to figure out how to take their first steps. And I'll explain what bonds are in a very simple way, even if you've never invested in your life. In particular, we'll see how they work, how much they yield, what the risks are, because there are risks here too. And most importantly, how they can help you build a more stable portfolio. Now, if you're new to the channel, subscribe. If you're already subscribed, you know by following me on Instagram that I'm starting to talk about investments as well, basic investments. Nothing too complicated. Why? Because we shouldn't be ignorant when it comes to financial matters. Guys, understanding the basics seems hard, but it's not. Because there are those 2 or 3 principles that, if you understand them well, put you above the Italian average. Obviously, if you're not following me on Instagram yet, do it. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, subscribe right away. Because on this channel, I help people become aware of their expenses, their money. I teach them how to save, set money aside, and start investing. So very simply, what are bonds? Bonds are loans, just like the ones you take out when you need to buy something. Let's set that aside. I'm generally against loans, but this isn't the video to discuss them. But at the end of the day, you're buying debt, you're lending money to someone, whether it's a company or a government. What you're doing when you buy bonds is buying debt. Now, in exchange for your money, what do they promise you? Basically, they promise you 2 things. First of all, your principal, because the principal is guaranteed. The timing, 1, 2, or 3 years, depends on the bond structure. And then they pay you periodic interest, which are the well-known coupons. Here too, they can be semi-annual. It depends on the bond you're buying. If you've heard about Buoni del Tesoro Poliennali Italia, which are a bit more well-known, there are the famous coupons. There are percentages that they pay you over time. So they are debt instruments and not ownership instruments, like stocks. Okay, that's also a difference between bonds and stocks. The nice thing is that you can buy them even with a small amount of money from regulated platforms. Normally, the minimum amount to buy bonds is 1,000 euros. So let's start with how to buy bonds. To buy them, you need an investment platform, a bank or a broker. In this case, a platform you can use, and that I use as well, is Freedom24. With Freedom24, you can access a global market. Just think, there are more than 147,000 bonds, so there's an overwhelming amount of choice. But the really nice thing that Freedom24 has done, especially for those who are just starting out, is to create a bond showcase section, where basically every week they select the most interesting bonds. Obviously, all of this is based on the rating, the maturity, and the yield. So if you're a beginner, this section can definitely help you understand where to start. Also guys, remember Freedom24 is regulated by SISEC and authorized by Consob and the Bank of Italy. It only takes a few minutes to open an account. You can do it from the link in the description, and you can even start with a small amount. Freedom24 offers a wide variety of products including bonds, ETFs, stocks, and more. Why choose Freedom24? Open an account using the link in the description and fund it by August 30th. You can receive up to 20 free stocks worth up to $800. Let's identify the main points now. Types of bonds, because obviously if you want to understand how to navigate, if you want to invest on your own, you also need to understand what types of bonds exist. As for Italian government bonds, we have BOTs, BTPs, and CCTs. These are a bit less well known. Maybe you've heard about them less. These are widely used by regular savers. What are the benefits of these products? Taxation. Because in fact, the difference between bonds and other investments, such as stocks, ETFs, or even crypto, is that the taxation is at 12.5% instead of 26%. Now, we're not taxed on all the capital, guys. This is a very important thing to understand. We're taxed on the returns, that is on the profit. Then there are corporate bonds, which are basically bonds issued by companies. I mean, guys, as you can see, I speak very plainly, as I like to say. So, companies that are asking for money, a loan. In this case, though, there's potentially more risk. I mean, they're riskier compared to government bonds because we know that a company can go bankrupt more easily than a state. Then we have zero coupon bonds. However, these don't have coupons and work a bit differently compared to the other 2 products. Now, how does the yield of bonds work? First, the coupons. Coupons are regular payments that the issuer makes. They pay you regularly with a maturity date that has already been set from the beginning. You already know this when you buy. No, you already know that if you buy that specific Buoni del Tesoro Polienali, you'll get semi-annual coupons or maybe quarterly or even annual ones. Number 2, the repayment of the principal. In fact, if you hold the investment until maturity, they give you back all the principal. So they return the entire amount you invested, and on top of that, over time, you've earned interest on it. Yes, through the coupons. Third is capital gain. Why? If you sell before maturity and the price of the bonds has gone up, then you can also make a profit from this point of view. Here's an example. You buy a Buoni del Tesoro Polienali for 950 euros, hold it for 3 years, collect the coupons, and then sell it for 1,000 euros. So in this case, you've also earned some extra interest in addition to the coupons. But now, guys, we need to talk about the risks of bonds, because all investments have risks. And it's important to know that some have more, others less. Bonds, however, generally tend to be one of the products with less risk compared to other products. Like stocks, for example, which are riskier. Why are they riskier? Because their price fluctuates. It fluctuates much more rapidly. But to overcome this problem, there are also other tools we can use to diversify, like ETFs. But anyway, this isn't really the place for that. Anyway, if you want to learn how to start investing, just to be clear, I'm not a super expert, but I do know the basics and I can share my knowledge. So subscribe to the channel because we'll definitely talk about it more in the future. First risk, if interest rates go up, the value of bonds goes down, and this is called interest rate risk. Okay, this is the first risk we can have. The second is if the government or the company, the issuer, let's say, goes bankrupt, then you could lose your money, and this is called issuer risk. The last risk not to underestimate is if you invest in foreign currency. Here we have what's called exchange rate risk, because if the exchange rate between the two currencies changes, goes down or up, you could face a greater risk. So when we go to invest, maybe in foreign bonds, in addition to the two risks mentioned before, we also have this third risk. So the moral of the story: bonds also have risks, as we've seen, but they're definitely considered one of the most stable and less risky products, especially compared to stocks. Now, why is that? Are bonds suitable for the short term? So if we also have goals up to 5 years, like 2, 3 or 5 years, bonds can be a good option. Since I might need 5,000 euros for a specific expense in 5 years, I have to set them aside for that goal. I can have 5,000 plus a certain amount, okay? We've seen that the capital is guaranteed anyway, unless the state or the company goes bankrupt. But in fact, if we invest in government bonds, it's quite unlikely that a state will go bankrupt. There's a possibility, but it's still quite unlikely. And so they're actually recommended for the medium term. For example, if I invest 5,000 euros, unlike stocks that might drop 20%, in 5 years I might end up with minus 20%. I get 4,000 instead of 5,000, which is 1,000 euros less. Maybe for my goal, I can't afford to go down that much. Stocks, on the other hand, are recommended for the long term, for example, for investments. This is a very simple, basic concept. Short-term bonds are less risky, long-term stocks are more risky. This is a very simple, basic concept that already helps you understand, depending on your goals, what you should focus on more. Also, for example, when we talk about ETFs, there are ETFs that have a greater bond component, so they're better for the short term and lower risk. And those that have a greater equity component and therefore are more suitable for the long term. As I was saying earlier, many people use ETFs to balance this, which are products that are already diversified within themselves. On Freedom24, of course, if you want, you can also find some ETFs and maybe pick from there an exchange traded fund that has a higher bond component in case you have a short-term goal. Then, guys, as I told you on Freedom24, there are also ETFs, bonds, stocks, and many other products. What I want to tell you, though, is that Freedom24 is part of Freedom Holding Corporation, which is listed on the stock exchange on Nasdaq. So this is another point that shows us how solid it is as a company, as a broker. Freedom24. Now, what could be a strategy to start investing in bonds? Definitely start with small amounts. Here. This is something I want to say to all the people who would like to start investing but are afraid. You don't need to start with huge amounts, start with small steps. That way you take a small risk. And gradually you can become more familiar with the tools, the world of investments, and everything else. So if we start with a small amount, the fear goes away. So when it comes to bonds, I don't know, it could be 1,000 or 2,000 euros as the amount to start with. Secondly, choose solid issuers such as states or companies. We need to understand what investment grade means, including its risk and reliability. The third point is to diversify among maturities. So instead of buying all bonds with the same maturity, get one for 1 year, another for 3 years, and another for 5 years. And importantly, to buy them from different issuers as well. This is another thing that helps us further reduce risk, because in investing, diversification, so investing in different instruments, helps us reduce the risk of loss. Point number 4, also consider bond ETFs. Why bond ETFs? Because they help us reduce single issuer risk. No, if we invest 5,000 euros in a single bond and it performs poorly, we risked all our 5,000 euros, but what if with those 5,000 euros we did something else? 2,000 euros on one bond, 2,000 euros on another, and 1,000 on a bond exchange traded fund. That's how we really reduce the risk. In conclusion, bonds are instruments that are often underestimated. They definitely won't make you rich, but they'll help prevent your savings from being eroded by inflation. If you just set money aside and let it sit, you're basically losing money. But if you invest them even in low-risk products that give you a return, it helps you maintain the value of your money. That's already a good thing, especially for those who want to start investing. It's not like they want to make millions with investments. So the nice thing about bonds is that they give you stability and also protection. This is a suitable tool, especially if you want to invest in a cautious way. So all those people who might be more afraid of risk don't want to take big risks. That's where bonds are a suitable product. Now write in the comments if you've already bought bonds. How did it go? If you're interested in bonds, you might be trying to understand how they work or considering buying your first ones. And let me know if for 2026 or for the next videos you want content, maybe something specific about bonds. That said, guys, I remind you about the link in the description. To open an account with Freedom24, the promotion is valid until August 30th, and you can get up to 20 free shares worth up to $800. Obviously, if you fund your account, opening the account is free. It doesn't cost anything, of course. Let me know in the comments what you think. If you have any questions, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. That goes without saying, and as usual, I'll see you around.